We will get started in just a moment. We'll grant everyone another few seconds to fill into the room, so to speak, and then we will begin. While we're waiting, let me say that if you have questions during the presentations, questions can be asked using the Q&A function on Zoom. In fact, this is the only way of asking a question. And we will get to as many questions as time and circumstances permit after each of the speakers has presented. So you can post your question on the Q&A, however, at any time. We can't hear you, we can't see you, but we know you're there and we will take your questions as possible. So thanks. I see some raised hands. I raise my hand to you back. Hello. And I think we can start. Well, there's a lot of raised hands. I hope you're saying hello and that you don't have questions already. So nevertheless, welcome everyone. And good afternoon from Belmont, Massachusetts to wherever you are and whatever time it may be where you are. My name is Mark MAMIGONIAN and I'm the Director of Academic Affairs at the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research. About a month ago, when Professor MARANCI and I started discussing holding this event, it was born out of a deep concern over events then unfolding and what we saw as the lack of international response. Needless to say, that concern has only deepened immeasurably with the catastrophic events that culminated this week. We have people with us today in the virtual audience based on the 700 who registered for this event from across the United States, Canada, Brazil, Argentina, Great Britain, Sweden, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, France, Malta, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Germany, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Czech Republic, Austria, Hungary, Romania, Serbia, Greece, Cyprus, Tunisia, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Bahrain, Israel, Turkey, Armenia, Georgia, Russia, China, Bangladesh, Thailand, Australia, and elsewhere. That's rather remarkable. Under different circumstances, I would remark with great joy on such a worldwide gathering coming together to hear about the Armenian cultural heritage of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. But notwithstanding the outstanding scholars we have gathered together today and the global nature of the audience participation, this is not, of course, a celebratory occasion. The amount of interest in today's program prompts me, if I may be allowed this very brief indulgence, to imagine what sort of discussion we might be having if the nations of the world from which our audience is drawn, and I start with my own, the United States, had shown even a tiny amount of interest or concern about what has just occurred or about what happens next. I won't dwell on this point because this is not the time or the place, and because it enters into a danger zone of self-pity that is neither healthy nor productive, and finally, because the world does not run on what-ifs. I can't say much more than that. The words to convey what it is that I'm feeling, and frankly, my feelings and your feelings are irrelevant in the face of the enormous task that is at hand. Anyway, I lack the words for what really needs to be said. So I must basically repeat something that I said a few days ago for a different event, and that is that I hope we can come together and rise to the task of not granting victory to those whose goal is the destruction of the Armenian people and culture. It's important to acknowledge with gratitude the co-sponsors of this event. The Dadian-Oztemel Professor of Armenian Art and Architecture at Tufts University, from whom we shall hear presently, the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, NAASR, and the Society for Armenian Studies, with special thanks to its president, PETROSYAN. I will now hand the virtual lectern over to my esteemed friend and colleague, CHRISTINA MARANCI, without whom we would not be together today. CHRISTINA.
Thank you, Mark. Before we begin the presentations, I want to say a few words about why this panel was brought together and what we hope to achieve. As many of you know, on November 9th, the president of Armenia signed an agreement to hand over several areas of Artsakh to Azerbaijan, including the districts of Karvajar, Kashatagh, which is Lachin, Hadrut, and Akdam, in increments over the next weeks, starting tomorrow. This puts a great number of Armenian monuments, cross stones, and inscriptions in these regions in great danger, owing to the well-documented engagement of Azerbaijan in cultural genocide. This NAASR event forms part of an appeal, like the petitions and open letters circulating worldwide online, as well as fast developing initiatives worldwide to draw attention to the monuments and their fate. Part of the effort of safeguarding must involve education and public awareness. There is very little available in English on the Armenian heritage of Artsakh, despite its artistic and historical significance. This is a real problem because in a moment like this, we need more fine-grained scholarship, not only to document the existence of these Armenian monuments, but to tell their deep and detailed history. And of course, such work will also serve to combat the falsifications of the monuments and history more generally, appearing increasingly online. The distinguished speakers today are experts on various aspects of this subject, and we are delighted that they have agreed to join us in the midst of this crisis. It should be said that we discuss here only a small aspect of the much broader cultural dimensions of the region, including not only Armenian architecture, but a range of cultural traditions, such as native carpet making, oral histories, music and dance, and dialects. And this is not to mention the fragile ecosystems and wildlife damaged by Azerbaijan's use of white phosphorus munitions. For those who have had the good fortune to go there, Artsakh is one of the world's most astonishingly beautiful places and home to an irreplaceable heritage that belongs not just to Armenia, but to the whole world. Our first speaker is Professor Patrick Donabedian, well known to many of us. Patrick is Associate Professor Emeritus of Armenian Studies at Aix-Marseille University and researcher in the history of Armenian art and architecture at the Laboratoire d'Archaeologie médiévale et moderne et méditerranée at Aix-Marseille University and the National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS. He will offer us an overview of medieval architecture in Artsakh. So Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina. In Artsakh, as in the rest of historical Armenia, since the 4th century, religious architecture has been the main expression, serving almost exclusively Christianity. For that reason, in spite of an absence of maintenance during most of the 20th century, several hundred churches and chapels, together with a series of monastic complexes, still survive today. There are also some Muslim monuments, a consequence of the installation of Islamized populations at the foot of the Armenian plateau after the Turco-Mongol invasions. Of these are mausoleums dating from the 14th, 15th centuries. Others result from the settlement of Turco-Tatar power in the heart of the mountainous massif in the second half of the 18th century. This is the case of the mosques in the town of. As for civil and military architecture, it comprises bridges, the remains of medieval fortresses and palaces, dating from the 17th, 18th centuries. The vernacular architecture of Artsakh includes some ancient specimens of Gur Khatun, a type of rural dwellings with Hazarashen cupola, with progressively corbelled beams and a central skylight called yerdik. Houses in stone with tile or metal roofing exist in great number, most of them dating to the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th. They display features common to several regions from the Balkans to the South Caucasus. In particular, long balconies with ornamental wood apertures on the upper floor. As they had resist to earthquakes, most of religious edifices are built according to the poured concrete construction technique. The main building material is the volcanic tuff, reduced into rubble and mixed in with lime mortar to form the core of the wall. In large city and monastery buildings, the walls are then lined with a siding made of blocks which are carefully hewn on their external face. The cupola, highlighted with heavenly symbolism and highly prized by Armenian architects through the centuries, crowns the main religions. However, in comparison with the rest of Armenia, one can find in Artsakh a larger number of oblong churches without cupola. As in the rest of the country, the cult buildings are oriented with the altar to the. In the eastern extremity of the interior is the apse, generally rounded, called choran in Armenia. Within the apse, the altar table is placed on an elevated platform called bem in Armenia. In Artsakh, many single chapels are unusual, as you can see on this table, are unusual in that the is rectangular and not round. Only a few monuments of early Christian and pre-Arab period, 4th, 7th centuries, have survived. Saint Grigory's mausoleum in Amaras is among the oldest monuments. In the 4th, Grigoris, the grandson of Saint Gregory the Illuminator, came to evangelize the kingdom of Caucasian Albania to the east of Artsakh. He was martyred in 338, buried in Amaras, but his grave was discovered only at the end of the 5th century. A mausoleum was built on the site by King Vachagan in 489, at a time when the region was annexed to Albania. Nowadays, the mausoleum is a crypt under a basilica built in the end of the 19th century. It is a small vaulted chamber oriented east and originally including 2 side vestibules to allow pilgrims to pass through. It is in line with a homogeneous group of about 10 martyria specific to early Christian Armenia. In the early Christian times, 4th, 6th centuries, the cupola was still rare. Most of the religious edifices were vaulted halls without a cupola. The smallest chapels were built with a single nave, while a three-nave type of basilica was used in the larger churches. This is a single nave example from Tigranakert by our friend HAMLET, who will speak after me. And here examples of three-nave basilicas, among them Citernavank in Artsakh. The Citernavank church, recently restored in the district of Kashatar, Lachin, or Berdzor, is one of the best preserved specimens of the basilica type in Armenia. It forms a long vessel in which the main nave is higher than the aisles, thus allowing the installation of a gallery above the apse, a very unusual device. From its first appearance in the 4th, 5th centuries, especially in Aix-Marseille, the cupola tended to gather all parts of the building below it. Thus, cruciform and radiating compositions became increasingly numerous in 6th, 7th century Armenia. Such types are found in Artsakh as well. The Vankasaj chapel in the district of Ardam, dated to the 7th century, one of the rare monuments grossly restored during Soviet times, presents a cupola which, through an octagonal drum, leans on the central square of a free cross. In the ruins of Ochtederni, in the district of Hadrut, the cupola covered the junction of 4 rounded conches and 4 niches, so that it resembles a series of 7th century churches in Armenia and Georgia. The post-Arab period, 10th, 11th centuries, marked by the establishment of several kingdoms, is illustrated by a rich architecture that flourished throughout the country. It is represented in the Artsakh province just by a few buildings, which are not precisely, notably the cruciform dome chapel of Varazgom in the district of Kashatar or Lachin or Berdzor. Much more numerous are the works which testify to the architectural growth recorded by Armenia in the post-Seljuk and the beginning of the Mongol period, late 12th and 13th centuries. In the rest of the country, the dominant feudal families multiplied the number of new monastic foundations in Artsakh. The monasteries were the main centers of spiritual, cultural, and artistic life, sheltering scriptoria where numerous manuscripts were copied and illuminated. The Dadivank monastery, 13th century, is one of the largest complexes in the whole of medieval Armenia. Recently restored, it consists of some 20 edifices divided into 3 groups for worship, housing, and activities of the brotherhood. Some pictures from Dadivank. which is in one of these territories, which is going to be retroceded to Azerbaijan. So we can't help but be very worried about the fate of this complex, of this large ensemble. And also, I want to show you the two pictures from the recently restored frescoes inside, in the interior of the main church of Dadivank. Among the monastic churches, single nave compositions without cupola continue to be much more prevalent than in the rest of Armenia. A characteristic example is provided by the monastery called Yerevan, which has no fewer than 8 single nave chapels arranged to south. But the prevalent model in the Armenian monastic, in the Armenian monasteries of the time is the dome church, in which the cruciform volume inside is inscribed in a rectangular perimeter with 2 or 4 small sacristies housed in the corners and with supports of the dome attached to the perimeter walls. The main church of Gandzasar has an umbrella roof on its dome, a common feature of medieval Armenian churches, highlighted by the elegance of their proportions and the abundance and refinement of their decoration. These monastic churches, Dadivank and Gandzasar, are among the finest achievements in the medieval art of Karabakh and of Armenia as a whole. Some pictures from the main church of Gandzasar. Representative of the Armenian monastic architecture of the 13th century, the Gavit or Jamatun, at once narthex and mausoleum, is omnipresent on the western facade of the churches. It takes many forms. In Gandzasar, in the narthex of Gandzasar is used a remarkable formula in which the vault rests on 2 pairs of intersecting edges. This Gavit, whose composition is the same as at Harpat and Mushkavank in northern Armenia, provides in the center one of the finest examples of an Armenian vault notched with stalactites. In the large complex of Dadivank, the group of 4 southern edifices deserves a special attention. Here we find a refectory, a kitchen, a vast room called Tajar, perhaps feast room, and a library. No less interesting is the southwest group, in which the ample building on 3 levels that served as a monastic hostel adjoins edifices that were probably used as a residence, storage room, and prelacy.
15 minutes, Patrick.
Thank you. One of the mausoleums situated on the east fringe of Karabakh, Khachendorbatli, in the district of is also worthy of attention, not only for its own qualities, but also its links to the Arab inscription engraved on the monument, this mausoleum, states that it was erected in 1314 by a builder named Shahik. It is very close in resemblance to a funeral chapel, this one Christian, built at nearly the same time further west in the town of Yerevan in Armenia by the same architect, Shahik, who engraved his name in Armenian. So we have a very interesting example of an architect who worked for both a Muslim Christian sponsor. After a long interruption due to the invasions and wars during the 14th, 16th century, architectural life began to thrive again during the 17th century. Monasteries were restored, enlarged, and new complexes were built. Many monastic and parish churches adopted the composition, relatively easy to build, of the three-nave basilica. But churches were erected as well, such as in the monastery of Yerevan, as you see here. Finally, here also, as in the rest of Armenia, the 19th century was marked by a conjunction of innovations and to sanctuaries of the past. Saint Saviour Cathedral of Shushi, one of the largest religious edifices of modern Armenia, borrows its plan from Aix-Marseille Cathedral, although differing from it by the slender proportions of its umbrella on the dome and the unusual size of its high windows. The three-level bell tower, built a little earlier than the church, distinguishes itself by the originality of its sculptures. The images of the angels are, for the first time in Armenia, sculpted in the round. It means with entirely free volumes. As you know, this monument was twice bombed before the capture of Shushi. It thus embodies the grave threats to the Armenian architectural heritage of Artsakh. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for this important and learned presentation. Our next speaker is TAMARA Minasyan, who is a candidate of philological sciences. She is a senior researcher at the Matenadaran Mesrop Mashtots Institute of Ancient Manuscripts. She studies the manuscript heritage of Artsakh and Utik, and she will speak on the manuscript heritage of Artsakh. And art historian Sona Baloyan, senior international research specialist at the Matenadaran, will translate into English. So I will.
Of course. Thank you, Christina. Շնորհակալություն հայ գրավոր մշակույթի հնագույն կենտրոնների մեջ առանձնակի տեղ ունի մեծ հայտնի 10-րդ նահանգ Արցախը, Ավանդության համաձայն 5-րդ դարում Mesrop Մաշտոցը Արցախի առաջին դպրոցը բացել է Ամարասում, որը 4-րդ դարում հիմնադրել էր հայոց առաջին հայրապետ Գրիգոր Լուսավորիչը։
Artsakh, the 10th province of Greater Armenia, has a special place among the ancient centers of Armenian written culture. According to tradition, in the 5th century, Mesrop Mashtots established the first school of Artsakh in Amaras, which was founded in the 4th century by the first Armenian patriarch Gregory the Illuminator.
Ցավոք Ամարասից մեզ սեռագիր Մատյան չի հասել։ Դա ամենևին էլ չի նշանակում, թե վաղ միջնադարում Արցախում սեռագիր Մատյաններ չեն ստեղծվել։
Unfortunately, no manuscript from Amaras has come down to us, but this does not mean at all that manuscripts were not created in Artsakh in the early Middle Ages.
Դժգոհելով գրավոր սկզբնաղբյուրների սակավությունից, պատմիչ Մովսես Կաղանկատվածին խոսում է այրված, ոչնչացված, թալանված գրականության մասին, իսկ դրա պատճառը պատմիչը համարում է այն, որ անօրենները թալանել ու հրկիզել են մատյանները, իսկ շատերի գտնվելու վայրն էլ անհայտ է։
Complaining about the scarcity of written sources, the historian Moses Karankatvatsi wrote about burnt, destroyed, and looted literature, which the historian attributed to the fact that ungodly people plundered and burned the manuscript. Besides, the whereabouts of many are unknown.
Իրար հաջորդող արաբական, սելջուկ, թուրքական, մոնղոլական, թուրքմենական, պարսկական, դարեր շարունակ ընթացող աշխարհավեր արշավանքներն ու պատերազմները մեծագույն աղետ էին հայոց երկրի համար։ Դրանց հետևանքով քանդվեցին, ավերվեցին, թալանվեցին նաև վանքերն ու եկեղեցիները, հրկիզվեց ու ոչնչացավ վիթխարի քանակության մշակութային ժառանգություն, այդ թվում նաև ձեռագիր մատյաններ։
Successive Arab, Turk Seljuk, Mongol, Turkmen, and Persian destructive invasions and wars that lasted for centuries were great disasters for Armenia. As a result, monasteries and churches were demolished and looted, and vast amounts of cultural heritage, including manuscripts, were burned and destroyed.
Քաղաքական դաժան հալածանքների պայմաններում, աղետների ու վերելքների մեջ, մշակութային կյանքը, գիտությունը, արվեստներն ու կրթությունը երբեմն դադարներով, երբեմն մեղմ լիցքերով շարունակվում են, ծվարելով մենաստաններում և իշխանական հովանին վայելով եկեղեցիներում։ Դրա վկայությունն են Արցախի տարբեր գրչակենտրոններում ստեղծված և մեզ հասած աստվածաբանական, դավանաբանական, թարգմանական, պատմական, գիտական, մեկնողական, ուսումնական, ծիսական տարաբնույթ ձեռագիր մատյանները, որոնց հիշատակարանները նաև պատմական նյութեր և ուշագրավ տեղեկություններ են պարունակում Արցախի պատմության ու հոգևոր կյանքի վերաբերյալ, իսկ այստեղ ծաղկազարդված ձեռագրերն իրենց նկարազարդման յուրահատկությամբ և ոճական առանձնահատկություններով վկայում են մանրանկարչական ուրույն դպրոցի և նրա բարձր զարգացածության մասին։
In the conditions of severe political persecutions, disasters, and upheavals, cultural life, science, the arts, and education continued to develop, though slowly and sometimes with interruptions. They were concentrated in monasteries and churches sponsored by the authorities. This is evidenced by various theological, doctrinal, translated, historical, scientific, interpretive, educational, and ritual manuscripts created in different scriptoria of Artsakh, the colophons of which also contain historical materials and remarkable information about the history and spiritual life of Artsakh, and the illustrated manuscript with their stylistic features testify to the high development of a unique school of miniature art.
Արցախից մեզ հասած ձեռագրերի մեծ մասը պահվում են Mesrop Մաշտոցի անվան Մատենադարանում, Մյուսները սփռված են աշխարհի տարբեր ձեռագրապահոցներում եւ անձնական հավաքածուներում, շատերի ճակատագրերն էլ դեռ անհայտ են։
Most of the manuscripts that have come down to us from Artsakh are kept in the Mesrop, Mashtots, Matenadaran. Others are stored in various depositories and private collections around the world, and the fates of many are still unknown.
12-ից 13-րդ դարերում, երբ վերելք է ապրում շինարարությունը, կառուցվում եւ վերակառուցվում են վանքերն ու եկեղեցիները, ակտիվանում են նաեւ կրթության կենտրոնները։ Որպես կրթության կենտրոններ հայտնի են եղել Գանձասարը, Խադավանքը, Դադիվանքը, Գչավանքը, Մեծարանած Սուրբ Հակոբա, Եղժե Առաքյալի, Երից Մանկանց վանքերը, Ավետարանոց Կուսանած Անապատը, Գանձակը։
In the 12th and 13th centuries, when construction developed, monasteries and churches were built, and the scriptoria also became more active. Gandzasar, Khadavank, Dadivank, Gchavank, Metaranat Surp Hakopa, the monasteries of the Holy Apostle Yerishem, of the Holy Virgin, and Gandzak were famous also as scriptoria.
Բոլոր այս կենտրոններն ունեին մատենադարաններ, ձեռագրերի հարուստ հավաքածուներով։ Ձեռագրերի ընդօրինակմանը զուգահեռ Արցախում զարգացած է եղել նաև կազմարարությունը, ստեղծվել են ձեռագիր մատյանների կաշվե կազմեր եւ արծաթյա ոսկեզոծ կրկնակազմեր, որոնցից ամեն մեկը արվեստի լավագույն օրինակ է եւ հիացնում է իր գեղարվեստական հարդարանքով ու զարդամոտիվների բազմազանությամբ։
All these centers had depositories with rich collections of manuscripts. In parallel with the copying of manuscripts, book binding was also developed in Artsakh. Leather bindings and silver gilded double covers of manuscripts were created, each of which was an outstanding artwork and is admirable with its artistic decoration and variety of ornamentations.
Մեկ զեկուցման շրջանակներում հնարավոր չէ ներկայացնել բոլոր ձեռագրերը, ուստի ներկայացնում ենք մի քանի ձեռագիր մատյաններ, որոնք արժեքավոր են եւ իրենց պատմությամբ, եւ հիշատակարաններով, եւ բարձր արվեստով։
So it's impossible to speak about all the manuscripts within the framework of this one presentation. So we will represent you those which are more valuable for their history, colophons, and artistic significance.
Վախթանգ տանգիկի ավետարան, 13-րդ դար։ Այս ավետարանը Գանձասարից մեզ հասած ամենահին մատյանն է, գրիչը եւ ծաղկողը Թորոսն է։ Մատյանը մագաղաթյա է, գրված գեղեցիկ երկաթագրով։ Այն Հասան Ջալալյանների տոհմական ավետարանն է, գրվել է Արցախի իշխան Հասան Ջալալ Դոլայի ծնողների Վախթանգ տանգիկի եւ Խորիշահի պատվերով 1212-ից 14 թվականների ընթացքում։ Թորոսը բարձր արվեստով եւ ճաշակով ծաղկել է մատյանը, նկարել է խորանները, կիսախորանները, ավետարանիչների անվանաթերթերը, բազմաթիվ գեղեցիկ զարդամոտիվներ, բուսական եւ կենդանական լուսանցազարդեր։ Ավետարանն ունի նաեւ ձեռագրի գեղարվեստական հարդարանքից տարբերվող մեկ տերունական պատկեր։ Աստվածամայրը մանկան հետ աջ կողմում Գաբրիել հրեշտակն է, թևերը բացած, իսկ ներքևում երկու ավետարանիչները կրծքներին սեղմած սուրբ գիրքը։ Այն հետագայի լրացում է, որը կատարել է Թորոսի աշակերտը։ Ավետարանում պահպանվել է նաև Հասան Ջալալ Դոլայի 1261 թվականի հիշատակարանը։
The Gospel of Vachtank Tangik is a 13th century Gospel. It is the oldest extant manuscript from Gandzasar. The scribe and painter is Toros. The manuscript was written on parchment in beautiful Yekatagich script. It was the family gospel of the Hassan Jalalians, copied by the order of Prince Hassan Jalal Dola's parents, Vachtank Tangik and Khorisha, between 1212 and 1214. Torres illustrated the manuscript with great taste. He painted canon tables, semi-canon tables, the title pages of the evangelists, many beautiful ornamentations, floral and animal marginal motifs. The Gospel also has an image from the Christological cycle that differs from the general artistic decoration of the manuscript. It's the Mother of God with the child. On the right, one sees Archangel Gabriel with open wings, and below there are the two evangelists holding the Holy Book on their chests. This image was depicted later by Torres student Hassan Jalal Dolla's Torres student. And Hassan Jalal Dolla's colophon, copied in 1261, has also been preserved in the Gospel.
Հաջորդ ձեռագիր մատյանը Ումեկի որդի Վախթանգի ձեռագիրն է։ Ազնվական Ումեկի եւ Հասան Ջալալի դուստր Մամա Խաթունի որդին էր Վախթանգը, որի պատվերով գրվել է այս ձեռագիրը։ Այստեղ ուշադրության է արժանի բարձր թիկնաթոռին բազմած իշխանազուն Վախթանգը, որի հանդերձանքից երևում է միջնադարյան ազնվականի կենցաղը եւ ունի ազգագրական բացառիկ նշանակություն։
Our next manuscript is Umek's son Vakhtang manuscript belonging to the 13th century. Vakhtang was the son of the nobleman Umek and Hassan Jalal's daughter Mama Khatun, by whose order this manuscript was copied. The image of Prince Vakhtang sitting on the throne is noteworthy. His clothes provide ideas of a medieval nobleman's everyday life, thus having a unique ethnographic significance.
Հաջորդ նկարը։ Այս արձանագրությունը կոչվում է հաթերքի կամ խադավանքի արձանագրություն։ Այն կարելի է համարել խադավանքի գրչության կենտրոնի անձնագիրը։ 1195-ից 1204 թվականներին Հովանես Խաչենցին վերանորոգում է 1139 թվականի երկրաշարժից և 1143 թվականի սելջուկ թուրքերի ասպատակություններից ավերված խադավանքի եկեղեցին, այնտեղ մեծաքանակ ձեռագիր մատյաններ ու խաչեր է հավաքում, հիմնում է Մատենադարան, հին և նոր այգիներ է նվիրում վանքին։ Այս բոլորը հաթերքի տեր Վախթանգի միջնորդությամբ ընծայում է իր ավագ եղբոր Հասանին և նրա որդիներին։
This inscription is called the inscription of Haterk or Khadavang. It can be considered the identification card of the scriptorium of Khadavang. Between 1195 and 1204, Hovannes Khachens rebuilt the church of Khadavang, destroyed as a result of an earthquake in 1139 and the invasions of Seljuk Turks in 1143. He collected there a large number of manuscripts and cross stones, established a depository, and gifted old and new gardens to the monastery. Through the mediation of Vakhtang, ruler of Haterk, he gifted all this to his elder brother Hassan and his sons.
Նույն արձանագրության համաձայն Հասանն էլ իր հերթին է վանքին այգիներ նվիրում։ Սրանով հիմք է դրվում խադավանքի գրչակենտրոնի իր նշանավոր քահանայական դպրոցով, գրչատնով և մատենադարանով, իսկ հիմնադիրն էլ համարվում է Հովանես Խաչենցին։ Այս արձանագրությունը, որ խադավանքի գրչության կենտրոնի և մատենադարանի հիմնադրման մասին առաջին վկայագիրն է, քանդակված է եղել եկեղեցու արևելյան ճակատին։ Այսօր այս վիմագիրը բոլորովին անխաթար վիճակով գտնվում է Mesrop Մաշտոցի անվան մատենադարանի ցուցադրությունում։
According to the same inscription, Hassan also gifted a garden to the monastery. This laid the foundation of the scriptorium of Khadavang with its famous seminary and depository, and Hovannes Khachens is considered its founder. This inscription, which is the first testimony of the establishment of the scriptorium and depository of Khadavang, was engraved on the eastern facade of the church. Today, this lithograph is completely undamaged and is displayed at the Mesrop Mashtots Matenadaran.
Ավետարանը կոչվում է թարգմանչած ավետարան։ Այս մագաղաթյա շքեղ ավետարանը վերին խաչենի Գրիգոր Դոփյան իշխանը նվիրել է խադավանքին։ Ավետարանը շուրջ մեկ դար մինչև 1900 թվականը Գարդման գավառի թարգմանչած վանքում պահվելու համար վանքի անունով կոչվել է թարգմանչած ավետարան։ Ձեռագիրը գրված է լավ մշակված սպիտակ մագաղաթի վրա գեղեցիկ երկաթագրով։ Թարգմանչած ավետարանը մեզ է հասել առանց գլխավոր հիշատակարանի, բայց հայտնի է նրա գրչության և ծաղկազարդման թվականը։ Ավետարանը 1232 թվականին գրել է Տիրացուն և ծաղկել է Գրիգորը։
Grigor Dopian, Prince of Upper Khachen, gifted this magnificent gospel to Khadavang. For nearly a century, until 1900, the gospel was kept in the Turkmenchat monastery in the Gardman province, and that is why it was named Turkmenchat Gospel. The manuscript is written on a well-processed white parchment in beautiful Yertatagir script. The main colophon of the Turkmenchat Gospel has not been preserved, but the date of its copying and painting is known. The Gospel was copied in 1232 by Tiratsu and illustrated by Grigor.
Հետաքրքիր է, որ այս ավետարանն ունի երկու ծաղկող, երկուսն էլ Գրիգոր անունով։ Առաջին Գրիգորը, որին անվանում են Գրիգոր ծաղկող, գրչի հետ նույն ժամանակում նկարել է խորանները, ավետարան առաջները, լուսանցազարդերը և զարդագրերը։ 14-րդ դարում Գրիգոր իշխանը, երբ ստանում է ձեռագիրը և նվիրում խադավանքին, երկրորդ Գրիգորը այստեղ նկարում է ավետարանիչների և տերունական պատկերները։ Քանի որ երկրորդ Գրիգորը Արցախում է կատարել նկարազարդումը, անվանում ենք Գրիգոր Արցախեցի։
Interestingly, this gospel has two painters, and the name of both is Grigor. The first Grigor, whom we call Grigor Tsarkov, or Grigor the painter, painted the canon tables, title pages, marginal decorations, and ornamentations in the same year when the manuscript was copied. In the 14th century, when Prince Grigor received the manuscript and gifted it to the monastery, the second Grigor painted the evangelists and the image from the Christological cycle. Since the second Grigor made his illustrations in Artsakh, we call him Grigor Artsakhetsi.
1311 թվականին վախճանվում է Գրիգոր Դոփյանի կինը Ասփան։ Կնոջ հիշատակին իշխանը վանքին է նվիրում մեծ հարստություն, գյուղեր, այգիներ, անդաստաններ, զանազան սպասք և հանդերձներ, իսկ ավետարանը զարդարել է տալիս ոսկով և արծաթով։
In 1311, Grigor Dopian's wife Aspa passed away. In memory of his wife, the prince gifted a great wealth to the monastery: villages, gardens, orchards, various dishes and garments, and then he ordered to decorate the gospel with gold and silver.
Ուշ միջնադարում ավետարանոց ավանիկ ուսանած անապատում է գործել Գայանե գրչուհին, որը սերում էր իշխանական տոհմից։ Ավանդազրույցը պատմում է, որ Գայանեն սպանում է գյուղ ներխուժած և իր հետ ամուսնանալ ցանկացող թուրք զորավարին, 1633 թվականին մտնում է վանք և մինչև կյանքի վերջն իրեն նվիրում է գրչության արվեստին։ Գայանեից մեզ հայտնի է 3 ձեռագիր։
In the late Middle Ages, scribe Gayane, a descendant of a ruling dynasty, worked at the Kusanat monastery of the Avetaranots village. According to tradition, Gayane killed a Turkish general who had invaded the village wanting to marry her. From Gayane, there are 3 manuscripts that are known.
Արցախը հայտնի է նաև ձեռագրերի փրկության և պահպանման վայր։ Շատ մատյաններ, որոնք ստեղծվել են այլ վայրերում, Արցախ են հասել նվիրատվությունների կամ փրկագնման ճանապարհով և պահվել նահանգի տարբեր բնակավայրերում, եկեղեցիներում և անհատ մարդկանց մոտ։ Փաստերը վկայում են, որ արցախցի իշխանները և իշխանազունները երբ վերադարձել են պատերազմներից, աճուրդներից գնել եւ իրենց հետ բերել են հայկական ձեռագրեր։ Այդ մասին գրում է նաեւ պատմիչ Կիրակոս Գանձակիցին։
Artsakh is also known as a place of salvation and preservation of manuscripts. Many manuscripts created elsewhere have reached Artsakh through donations or ransoms and have been kept in various parts of Artsakh, in churches, as well as by individuals. As the facts show, princes and princesses from Artsakh, when returned from wars, brought with them Armenian manuscripts which they had bought at auctions. The historian Kyriakos Gantzaketsi also wrote about it.
1166 թվականին Հռոմկլայում գրված եւ 1244 թվականին Խադավանքին նվիրված մի ավետարանի հետագայի հիշատակարանում գրիչը գրում է, որ Կեսարիայից Արցախցի իշխանները իրենց հետ բերել են 4 ձեռագիր մատյան։ Հայ ձեռագրագիտության պատմության մեջ բացառիկ արժեք ունեցող մատյաններ, ինչպիսիք են Վեհամոր, Վեհափառի, Հաղպատի, Թարգմանչած, Մեջշենի անվանված ավետարանները, Բեգունց ավետարանի մագաղաթյա մասունքները, Ռաֆայել Սթորայի սեփականությունը եղած հանդիսացող մագաղաթյա մատյանը, որ գտնվում է Չիկագոյում, Կարնո կամ Թեոդոպոլսի ավետարանը գտնվում է Վենետիկում, Կերանի եւ Հեթումի ավետարանները եւ ելի շատ ու շատ ձեռագիր մատյաններ պահվել են Արցախի եկեղեցիներում ու անհատ մարդկանց մոտ, այսպես վերապրելով իրենց երկրորդ կյանքը։
In the colophon of a gospel copied in 1166 in Hronkla and presented to Khadavank in 1244, the scribe wrote that the princes of Artsakh had brought 4 manuscripts from Caesarea, unique and valuable manuscripts such as the Gospels of Vehamor, Vehapar, Hachbat, Turkmanchat, Metshen, the parchment relics of the Begun's Gospel, the parchment Gospel belonging to Raphael's Torah, today stored in Chicago, the Gospels of Karin or Theodopolis, stored in Venice, the Gospel of Keran and Hetum, and many others have been kept in the churches of Artsakh and by individuals, thus getting a second life.
Հաջորդ նկարը Վեհամոր ավետարանն է, հնությամբ 7-րդ դար հասնող այս ավետարանը մեզ հասած հայերեն ամենահին ամբողջական ձեռագիրն է։ Հնության պատճառով ձեռագիրն անվանել են նաև ծեր ավետարան։ Գրիչն ու գրչության վայրն անհայտ են։ Ավետարանը մագաղաթյա է, երկաթագիր, պարզ հարդարանքով, ընդելուզված մի քանի թանկարժեք քարերով եւ գամերով եւ առանց ծաղկազարդման։ Երկար ժամանակ պահվել է Գարդման գավառի մեծ բանանց գյուղում եւ կոչվել է նաեւ Բանանցի ավետարան, իսկ բանանցիցներն այն կոչել են նաեւ Պահապան ավետարան։
This gospel, dating back to the 7th century, is the oldest known complete Armenian manuscript. The manuscript was called Old Gospel because of its antiquity. The name of the scribe and place of copying is unknown. It is written on parchment in Yerkatagir script, has simple decoration. It is adorned with a few precious stones and nails and doesn't have any miniature illustrations. For a long time, the manuscript was kept in the Bananz village of the Gardman province and was called Gospel of Bananz. And the people of Bananz used to call it Guardian Gospel.
Ավետարանը հետո տարել են Գանձակի Սուրբ Գրիգոր եկեղեցի, որտեղից էլ Գանձակի հայոց թեմի առաջնորդ Վահան եպիսկոպոս Տերյանը բերել է Սուրբ Էջմիածին եւ նվիրել ամենայն հայոց հայրապետ Վազգեն առաջինին։ Վազգեն Վեհափառը անչափ արժևորելով ավետարանը այն նվիրել է Մատենադարանին եւ ի հիշատակ իր մոր Սիրանուշ Պալճյանի ձեռագիրը անվանվել է Վեհամոր ավետարան։ Ավետարանը բացառիկ է նաեւ նրանով, որ երթմնակալության ժամանակ ավետարանի վրա են երթվել Հայաստանի Հանրապետության նախագահները։
The gospel was then taken to the St. Gregory Church of Ganzak, from where the primate of the Armenian diocese of Gandzak, Bishop Vahan brought it to Holy Echmiadzin and gifted it to the Armenian Patriarch Vazgen I. His Holiness Vazgen I highly valued the Gospel and presented it to the Matenadaran in memory of his mother Siranush Balchan. That is why the manuscript is called Vehamor Gospel. The Gospel is also unique because all presidents of the Republic of Armenia give their oath on this manuscript.
Հաջորդ նկարը Վեհափարի ավետարանն է։ Այս ավետարանը նույնպես Մատենադարանին է նվերել Վազգեն Վեհափարը եւ կոչվում է Վեհափարի ավետարան։ Ավետարանը 10-րդ դարի մագաղաթյա ձեռագիր է։ Չեն պահպանվել գրչի, ծաղկողի եւ ստացողի հիշատակարանները։ Ենթադրվում է, որ այն ստեղծվել է Վանա լճի շրջակա գավառներից մեկում, իսկ նրա գրիչը, որ նաեւ մանրանկարիչն է, ժամանակի հմուտ գրիչներից մեկն է, ով հավասարապես տիրապետում է գրի բոլոր տեսակներին։
The Vehapar Gospel was also gifted to the Matenadaran by His Holiness Vazgen I. The Gospel dates back to the 10th century and was written on parchment. The colophons of the scribe, painter, and receiver have not survived. It is supposed to be created in one of the provinces around Lake Van, and the scribe, who was also the painter, was one of the most skilled scribes of the time, who equally mastered all types of script.
Մատյանը երկար դեգերումներով լի ճանապարհ է անցել։ 15-րդ դարում այն ձեռք է բերում Տաթևում կրթություն ստացած Սարգիս Վանականը, որի գերդաստանը հետո բնակություն է հաստատում Արցախի Փարիսոսի գավառի Քյուլլար գյուղում, իսկ ավետարանը դառնում է նրանց ընտանեկան սրբությունը եւ գյուղի անունով կոչվում Քյուլլարի ավետարան։ Իսկ երբ լեզգիների կողմից հիմնահատակ ավերվում է գյուղը, թալանվում է նաև ավետարանը։ Թշնամին չի արժևորում Մատյանը, տանում է միայն արծաթյա կազմը։ 1729 թվականին ձեռագիրը նվիրում են Խադավանքին։ 1978 թվականին ավետարանը Մանիկ եւ Թադեոս Անտիկյաններից ձեռք է բերում Վազգեն Վեհափարը եւ նվիրում Մատենադարանին։
The manuscript had a long journey. In the 15th century, it was acquired by the monk Sarkis, who was educated at the Datev monastery. His family later settled in the Kurlar village in the Parisos province of Artsakh, and the Gospel became their family shrine and was called the Gospel of Kurlar. When the village was completely destroyed by the Lezgins, the Gospel was plundered. The enemy did not appreciate the manuscript and took only the silver binding. In 1729, the manuscript was presented to Khadavank. In 1978, Vazgen I obtained the Gospel from Manik and Tadeos Antikyans and gifted it to the Matenadaran.
Հաջորդ ավետարանը Բեգունձ ավետարան։ Ավետարանի գրության սույր թվականը հայտնի չէ։ Գրվել է 10-ից 11-րդ դարերում, գրիչը Ստեփանոսն է։ Ձեռագիրը գրված է բոլորագիծ երկաթագրով։ Ստեփանոս քահանան կատարել է ավետարանիչների պատկերները եւ լուսանցազարդերը։ Մատյանին վերաբերող առաջին թվականը 1060-ն է։ Ավետարանն այս թվականին Կանչնուտ անապատի Արշարունյաց դպրոցում հայր Դավիթի ծախսերով նորոգել, լրացվել է թերին, ցանկերն ու անվանաթերթերը, ապա ծաղկել ու կազմվել է Հովանես Սանդղակավանեցի գրչի կողմից, իսկ Սարգիսը կատարել է խորանների նկարազարդումը եւ զարդարել արծաթով։
The exact date of the Begun's Gospel is unknown. It was copied in the 10th, 11th centuries by the scribe Stephanos. The manuscript is written in Bolorgir script. This Stephanos painted the images of the evangelists and the marginal ornamentations. The first date referring to the manuscript is 1060. The Gospel was restored at the Arsharnyat school of the Kanchnut monastery by the sponsorship of Father David. The missing list and the title pages were added, then it was illuminated and bound by scribe Hovannes Sandakhavanetsi, and Sarkis made the illustrations of the canon tables and embellished the manuscript with silver.
Ավետարանը 1272 թվականից առաջ փրկվել ու բերվել է Կեսարիայից եւ երկար ժամանակ գտնվել է Ջրաբերդի Թալիշ գյուղում Բեգունց ընտանիքի մոտ, որի պատճառով էլ կոչվել է Բեգունց ավետարան։ Դժբախտաբար գեղեցկագիր այս մատյանից մնացել է ընդամենը 18 թերթ, այս վիճակով էլ պահպանվում է Mesrop Mashtotsian վանք Matenadaran։
The Gospel was saved and brought from Caesarea before 1272 and for a long time was kept in the Talish village of Jirabert by the Beguns family, and that is how it got the name Beguns Gospel. Unfortunately, only 18 sheets have been survived from this beautifully written manuscript. In this condition, it is now stored at the Matenadaran.
Հաջորդը Հաղպատի ավետարան։ Այս ավետարանն էլ մի որոշ ժամանակ պահվել է Արցախում։ Ավետարանը 1211 թվականին Հաղպատում օրինակել է Հակոբ գրիչը, Անեցի Սահակ քահանայի խնդրանքով, ծաղկազարդել է մարգարեն Անիի Բեխենց վանքում, իսկ Հորոմոսում վանքի առաջնորդ Աբրահամը կազմել է այն։ Գրչության վայրի անունով ավետարանը կոչվել է Հաղպատի ավետարան։
The Gospel of Hachpat was kept in Artsakh for a while. It was copied in 1211 in Hachpat by the scribe Jacob at the request of priest Sahak from Ani. Painter Margaret illustrated it at the Bechens monastery of Ani, and Abraham, the spiritual leader of the Hormuz monastery, bound it. The name of the Gospel derives from the name of the place where it was copied.
Հաղպատի ավետարանի հիմնական արժեքը նրա մանրանկարչության մեջ է։ Մարգարեի ստեղծած պատկերները կրում են Անիի քաղաքային միջավայրի կյանքի և կենցաղի կնիքը։ Միակ թեմատիկ պատկերը մուտք Երուսաղեմն է, որը պահպանելով ավանդականությունը ինքնատիպ է իր հորինվածքով և բացառիկ աշխարհիկ ուղղվածությամբ։
The Hachpat Gospel is especially valuable for its miniatures. Margaret's created images represent the everyday urban life and environment of Ani. The only thematic image is the entry into Jerusalem, which on the one hand keeps the traditional iconography and on the other hand has a peculiar composition and a unique secular orientation.
1223 թվականին ավետարանը Անիում գնել և խադավանք է բերել Սարգիս քահանան։ Մատյանը Արցախում 3 անգամ նորոգվել և կազմվել է։ Որքան ժամանակ է այն մնացել խադավանքում հայտնի չէ։ Այստեղից ավետարանը տարվել է Գարդման գավառի Գետաշեն գյուղ և գյուղի անունով կոչվել Գետաշենի ավետարան։ Այստեղ պահվել է մինչև 20-րդ դարի սկիզբները։
In 1223, Priest Sarkis brought the Gospel in Ani and brought it to Khadavang. The manuscript was restored and bound in Artsakh 3 times. It is unknown how long the Gospel remained in Khadavang. From there, it was taken to the Gedashen village of the Kardamon province and was kept there until the beginning of the 20th century.
Եվ մեր Արցախյան մասնաճյուղի մասին 2015 թվականի նոյեմբերին Արցախում Գանձասարի վանքի հարևանությամբ բացվեց Մատենադարան Գանձասար գիտամշակութային կենտրոնը, որի նպատակն է ոչ միայն հայ, այլև օտարազգի այցելուներին հաղորդակից դարձնել Արցախում և ուտիքում գործած նշանավոր գրչության կենտրոններին, այդ կենտրոններում գրված և նկարազարդված, ինչպես նաև այլ վայրերից Արցախ բերված և պահված ձեռագրական մշակույթին։
Now a little about our branch in Artsakh. In November of 2015, next to the Gandzasar monastery, the Matenadaran Gandzasar Scientific and Cultural Center was opened. aiming at acquainting not only Armenian but also foreign visitors with the famous scriptoria in Artsakh and Utik, and the manuscripts copied and illustrated in those centers, as well as with the legacy brought to Artsakh from other places.
Matenadaran գանձասար մշակութային կենտրոնում Արցախ ուտիկյան ձեռագրերի կողքին առանձին բաժիններով ցուցադրվում են նաև Կիլիկիայում և Հայաստանի այլ վայրերում ստեղծված ձեռագիր մատյաններ։ Առանձին բաժիններով ներկայացվում էին հայկական նշանավոր տպագրատներում հրատարակված, նաև Շուշիում տպագրված գրքեր, ինչպես նաև արխիվային փաստաթղթեր, որոնք կաթողիկոսական կոնդակներ են, Արցախի մելիքների փաստաթղթեր, կնքված անհատական մատանի կլիքներով։
Manuscripts created in Cilicia and other places of Armenia are displayed there along with the manuscripts from Artsakh and Utik. Books published in Armenian prominent publishing houses in Shushi, as well as archival documents which are decrees of patriarchs, documents of the meliks of Artsakh sealed with individual ring seals, are also exhibited there.
Այս տարի նոյեմբերի 21-ին լրանում է կենտրոնի հիմնադրման 5 տարին։ Այս 5 տարիների ընթացքում ունեցել ենք բազմաթիվ նոր ցուցադրություններ, գրքերի շնորհանդեսներ, կներեք հուզվում եմ, գիտաժողովներ, իսկ անցյալ տարի կազմակերպվեց նաև միջազգային գիտաժողով։
On November 21st, the center will mark the 5th anniversary of its foundation. During these 5 years, many exhibitions, book presentations, and conferences, including an international conference that took place last year, were organized.
Ահա այն ամենը, ինչ ես ցանկացա ներկայացնել Արցախի գրչության կենտրոնների, Արցախում ստեղծված և Արցախում պահված ձեռագրերի մասին։
This is all what Tamara wanted to represent today from Artsakh, from the scriptoria of Artsakh.
Thank you so much, Shonagalutyun, Harkeli, Tamara. Thank you, Sona, for the translation. And for information about something so many of us don't know enough about. Shonagalutyun, thank you so much.
Ներեցեք վերջի պահին հուզվեցի ու դա բնական է, շատ բնական է։
Our final speaker is Professor HAMLET PETROSYAN, who is head of the Department of Cultural Studies at Yerevan State University and head of the Artsakh Archaeological Expedition of the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography of the National Academy of Sciences of Armenia. Professor Petrosyan will speak on the current situation with the monuments, with a focus on the site of Tigranakert in Artsakh and the early Christian stelae and khachkars of the region. Professor Petrosyan. I think you're on mute.
Christina, good evening to everyone. I will present, okay, let me just justify here. At first I will speak about the current situation. It's very hard and I will just inform you on some realities that now which have. Then I will speak about the culture and landscape of Artsakh and Utik because it's a very important to know the real face of a medieval Artsakh Christian culture. Then, of course, my lovely city Tigranakert I will present, and something about khachkars. Here you see the map of Soviet with Soviet boundaries, Armenian SSR and Nagorno-Karabakh Oblast, so-called. After the liberation, you know that we have had another situation when the liberated territories adjusted to Armenia, and we have over 30 years, flourishing economy and maybe culture. And during these years, I want to say that all monuments of Artsakh were documented. But now we really know how many monuments, how many khachkars, monasteries, churches, chapels, and so on we have in other regions. It will be helpful for further our, I don't know, for hard undertakings to do something else. So I want first to show you this map from the Russian Ministry of Defense. You can see that here in pink, we have a territory of former Nagorno-Karabakh Oblast partly. The green is Azerbaijani captured territories, and these blue parties are former Azerbaijani provinces, which unfortunately Armenian population must leave. Here the map of Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh Republic, the official list of monuments in the territory of the Artsakh Republic contains more than 4,000 monuments, 10% of which are pre-Christian, about 1.5% Muslim, among which about 10 are from the 14th to 16th century. The rest are Armenian Christian monuments dating back to the 4th, 19th century. And during the brutal Artsakh war, the enemy targeted culture too, from human dignity to monuments. The destruction of monuments dedicated to the patriotic Artsakh wars in Talish, the shelling of monuments of Tigranakert and Vankasar, the destruction of Tigranakert archaeological camp, the damage of the Hadrut and Martakert museums, Khachkars in Vorotan and Talish, Martuni's House of Culture can be added to the targeting of the Amenaperkij Ghazanchesos Church in Shushi. We don't know about many. About some of them, the Artsakh Monuments Monitoring Group continues to work. Here on the map, you see the main monuments which are or targeting or which are near the front border. So I show you the very famous photos from Shushi, and it's today's photo of Shushi bell tower with Azerbaijani inscription. So I don't think that international community, international cultural organizations will do or can do something against these barbarian acts. Here the Talish Memorial, the old photo and new photo, and Martuni's House of Culture. I will be a little faster. Tigranakert archaeological camp. There is not appropriate information about Kataro, Gitchavang, Spitak Khach monasteries, Tog village, and other sites of Hadrut region, which are under the control of Azeri forces. I want to say that Gitchavang, one of the famous 13th century cupola churches, the main church, and the Bana and the Spitak Khach monastery with its famous khachkar from 14th century with angels bringing the cross are well-known monuments of this region. But now we have not any information about it. There is not appropriate information about Horeka Monastery and Melik Beglarian's residence in Talish, which now under the occupation of, under the control of Azeri forces. I want and according to our information, the three famous monasteries, Yerisha, Arakial, Yeris Mankans, and Mesis, located near the northern front line, are in safety, but it is primarily information. So we are working on it to have more appropriate and more today's photos of that. So by the agreement of October 10, Azerbaijani troops remain in the occupied territory, which includes the former whole Hadrut region, Shushi city and most of the Shushi region, some parts of Askeran, Martuni and Martakert regions, which are in green, of former Nagorno-Karabakh Oblast. The Armenian side until October 15 depopulates the Karbacha region, October 20 Aghdam region, until December 1st Lachin region in blue. Judging by the map published by the Russian Ministry of Defense, the borders of the returned region should be identical to the borders that those regions had within Soviet Azerbaijan. As of today, we can talk about 1,500 Armenian Christian monuments, monasteries, churches, chapels, khachkars, tombs, other monuments that remain in the lost territories. This includes a number of famous and symbolical monuments and sites: Tigranakert, Vankasar Church, Dadivank, Handabert Monastery, Charektar Monastery, Chapni Monastery, Tsitsernavank, Kataro Monastery, Gitchavank, Horeka Monastery, Spitak Khach Monastery, Tog village, etc. According to the latest information, Amaras Monastery is under the control of Artsakh forces, but I cannot say be sure. So maybe it will be more better to give this information in the end of my speech, but I don't think, I think that many of our audience need this information. So let us say something about the geographical and cultural environment. Artsakh and Utik are the northeastern provinces of Greater Armenia. If Artsakh occupies the most mountainous and foothill lands of this part of the Armenian island, then Utik is more steppe, stretching to the Kura River. Artsakh is a country of river valleys enclosed in the mountains. To the east, where Utik begins, the mountains rise into the foothills and join the steppe. So here you can see some pictures of Artsakh valleys, and really the culture is developed in these circumstances. And this is Karkar Valley, not far from Stepanakert, near Askeran city. And this is a Varanda Valley where Amaras Monastery is situated. I want just to say that the culture of Artsakh is mainly agricultural society with strong fortresses, monasteries, and this all, of course, gave the future of the culture of medieval Artsakh. When the political forces were able to unite the mountainous and steppe, the canals flowing from the mighty rivers made the steppe fruitful. Otherwise, it became a stage of devastation and fighting of the mobile and militant tribes. Since at the least of middle of the second millennium BC, the steppe was covered or by agricultural monuments or by big kurgans of predatory and rich tribes. So when we're speaking about Artsakh, many think that it's a Nagorno, it's only mountainous, but the Artsakh and Utik were the unity until our days, and we see here not culture only mountainous or river valleys, but also the steppe cultures. And here a big kurgans of the end of second and the early first millennium BC, and this is our excavations in the steppe, where we find many anthropomorphic stelas belongs to 8th, 6th century AD. So I want to say that we have done a great job to identify, to describe, to date, and to do something about this. And this is the step, but it is interesting that this is an early medieval, very big settlement, Gavur Kala, which does mean the fortress on unbelievers. It was a very big Christian Armenian settlement, and one of the old Armenian inscriptions from this region came out from this settlement. It's a very big inscription of Hammam, king of Hammam. So this is a early medieval column, the only part, unfortunately, we yet have not excavated this area. So of course, the evidences about Artsakh and Utik as a part of Armenian kingdom we have from the 7th century BC. In the early 2nd century, Artaxerxes the Great reunit these parts, and only Tigranes the Great created another strategy. He built a very strong fortresses in the part where the rivers go to the steppe, and so he have under his attention until the Kura River, and one of that cities was, of course, Tigranakert, which we have digged over 60 years. This is the Khachenaget Valley and Tigranakert. So city is situated in that part where the hills became steppe. The city has a lengthness over 4.5 kilometers. So it was a very huge city with very huge environment. So just, I think we have not so much time. Just let have a faster look. The city is occupied over 70 hectares territory. It has a fortified quarter which was built by Tigranes the Great, the early Christian square, first and second antique quarters, early Christian cemetery, Eastern necropolis, rocky wine press, rocky channel, and so on. So you can see this before excavation and after our excavations, and the fortified quarter plan from Aya view. The fortified quarter was built only with very big stone blocks, limestone blocks, each of them from 100 kilograms to 1.5 tons. It's very interesting that some Azerbaijani publications say that Armenian archaeologists gathered these quadras, and during the night they constructed this fortress. And so no one can even move this very big quadras. In some cases, we have over 5 meters higher. And I want to say that all walls are on rock, on rocky foundations. And they are adjusting each other with a very strong way. So this is a rock cut foundation. Here we have a ribbon-like rows, one from outside, another to inside. So you can imagine that 3 meters in width, these walls were constructed via 3-part technology, very strong inside and outside rows, and the very very not so strong middle parts. And this is a traces of technique, how they separated of blocks from the limestone rock. And Patrick said, I want just to stress that in Tigranakert we have the first steps of using a limestone mortar. It's before in Armenian architecture, we have evidences about using mortar in 3rd, 4th century AD. But in Tigranakert, we have using mortars in 1st century AD. You can see that first line blocks are fixed in groove, and you can see the grooves filled with mortar when the quadres, maybe some 100 years, were taken out. And the mortar using to separate the foundation and the rocky surface, and also they use this mortar to fill up the central part of stones. And here we can see the rustification or rustication of all the quadras and buelles. It's very strong Hellenistic technique of construction, and now in all regions, including Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Persia, we have not such a big, such a well constructed monuments. And okay, I will just show some photographs. And here the fortified quarter plans, and we can see that this construction is contains 3 parts. This is an ideal system of construction: a rectangular tower, zigzag wall, and then a round tower. So you can have a more length or short zigzag, but by this you can put is on relief to have not done more engineering jobs here. And the city's quarters with the so-called all are in the right lines, which is typically for Hellenistic city constructions. And of course, the Hellenistic necropolis, which gave us many Parthian coins, which gave us the basis to correctly date our archaeological materials. And of course, the excavations of so-called Pitos or Karas burials. It's very interesting that the culture of Karas burials go until Kura River. And the northern of Kura River, we have not such burials. So the investigation of Tigranakert give us a chance to speak about cultural or ethnocultural image of population of that era. And of course, we have many things which things of art, which demonstrated some rituals, demonstrated horses, some animals, hunters, and so on, since it's are unique even for this culture of pitosis, of culture of pictures. And of course, Tigranakert continued his life during early medieval ages. And we have Sasanian seals with very interesting inscriptions. It's very interesting that many scientists from other countries are interested in findings of Tigranakert because it was a very big and in some cases polyethnic city, because Tigranes the Great take out Hellenistic population from Asia Minor, and this is a really Hellenistic culture and Hellenistic city, and the tradition of Hellenism we can see in continuation of early medieval ages. So let's speak something about early Christian square. Dear Christina, if my time is will limit it, I can just only speak about Tigranakert and this early Christian area. Maybe we have another chance to speak about very interesting, very specific culture of Khachkars of Artsakh. So here you can see the one central Christian square before excavation and after excavation. It's really, but now when we can see that we have 3 or 4 early medieval squares, one of in Dvin, the second is Vagar-Shapat or contemporary Ech-Miadzin, the third may be in Aruj, but the largest one is the early Christian square in Tigranakert, which consists of 2 churches, the mausoleum under the one church, the column with winged crosses, and the ritual in the tombstones, early medieval, which we have digged. This is our excavation of the large basilica church, which with very interesting capitals, the cross in the so-called garden environment or cross in solar environment, and very specific details, especially the crosses in the ring, which are rare in early Armenian architecture, early Christian cemetery, winged crosses. So the large basilica, and here the second basilica and graveyard with sarcophagus and cystis or cryptis. I want to say that we have it now the Chalcolith data of this. They are belongs to end of 5th century and early 6th century. It's a time of reigning Vachagan de Pios, who have undertaken ecclesiastical revolution, so-called, and created a new church for his court, and this church was named Albanian Church. And after this, we have the 2 so-called churches, the Apostolic Armenian Church and the Albanian Church, the part of which were population of Artsakh and Utik. It's very interesting that under the little church we have digged a sepulchre. It's very interesting that this sepulchre or have only one entrance, and this entrance is from Eastern. We strongly know that all early Christian constructions must have the sorry. Milan. That early Christian constructions, religious buildings have, if they have only one entrance, this entrance must be from the west, not from the east. It was very curious, and at that time I remember that maybe the same entrance has the mausoleum of Saint Gregoris in Amaras. So this is a periodization of our sense. It's a compare, and we prepare the excavation in Amaras Monastery in the outer side of the church, and we have find the eastern entrance into the sepulchre. So now we can say about 3 entrances in the Saint Gregoris, and further. And it's very interesting that Albanian church has a so-called Jerusalemian legend that Yerisha apostle came here from Jerusalem, and you can see so-called Jerusalemian landscape, very unordinary in early Christian Armenia. Such landscape we can see only in Yerevan. It's very interesting. I want to say that the archaeological investigation of Tigranakert is not something nationalistic undertaken. We have done academic work, and we accepted it now that it's very interesting, not only for Armenian, it's not only factological data for Armenians in that region, but at that time it was a very fast communication between the old Christian world, and here we can see otherwise. So we can, I remember that there is another sepulchre not far from Ganzasar, and our digging in 2017, you can see broad a light and another such construction with eastern entrances.
And
I
maybe
would say
5
that
more minutes. Be 5 more minutes.
the excavation of Tigranakert is now in the apogee, and it will be nice, very nice, to continue this very interesting investigation, not interesting only for us, but for many scientists. And you know that the one only sepulchre who has a eastern entrance in the sepulchre of God in Jerusalem. So we see the very interesting connection between Jerusalem and Artsakh, and you can find these evidences in Movsens-Karakatvasi history too. So this is our sarcophagus. I want to thanks to Patrick and Paul, our anthropologists, who organize this all. And of course, when we are speaking about the real factological data, now we have over 20 Armenian inscriptions from Tigranakert excavations. Unfortunately, we haven't so much time, and I will present the clay disc from the large church, and here we can speak the Yes vache tsarati aranastso, mi vache or vachagan, servant of God. It's the oldest Armenian inscription from Artsakh, dated to end of 5th or maybe early 6th century, according to the new investigation. And it is very interesting that we have an amphoriscus for sacred liquid. You can find in history of Moses Karankatvatsi that many sanctuaries were built using by blood of first saints, and maybe this is one of the such amphorisks for, and the clay token with crucifixion. Often this token came from Jerusalem and from Palestine. So we have creating a very interesting historical narrative about Tigranakert, that Tigranakert not in the time of Tigranes the Great, but in the early medieval ages was one of the center of civilization. And very interesting that the sacred landscape of Tigranakert is comparable with sacred landscape of Vagar and sacred landscape of Jerusalem. The Tigranakert is located on two mountains. One on the top of Vankasar Mountains, we have this church of 7th century with 3 Armenian inscriptions, and in many stones we can find the signs of masters, which many of them are identical with the Sunni monastery in Sisyan or in Sunnic region. So we can construct a wider picture of culture, early Christian Artsakh, and it is interesting. So I want to say about this Khachkar. This Khachkar was near the Vankasar and had an Armenian inscription, which Alishan was published. Azerbaijanis in 17th erased the inscription and the cross and take this Khachkar to Aghdam Museum of Stones and name it as Albanian Khach. In one hand, they erase all Armenian. In another hand, they give these monuments Albanian name. And a very interesting early Christian structures in the another Tsitsar mountain, the mausoleum. And this year we have find the new church on this top of mountain, and the third one is expected for our excavation. It's very interesting, the agricultural area, and but it first let us to see the excavations of cave sanctuary complex of Tigranakert. The rock cut steps leading to sanctuaries. Here an old antique sacrifice was reformed to Christian church, and graveyard only in sarcophagus. It's very interesting that here we have Greek inscriptions. This Greek inscription, unfortunately, only Christos, Jesus Christos, but it's really one of the oldest Greek inscription in this territory, and it's show that this community who was such fast Christianized has his population not only Armenian but the Greek population. It's very interesting that some Arab sources in the way from Persia to Barda or Partal said about a Greek settlement. Before Tigranakert, many scientists thought that maybe this one, that one, but now we aware that this Greek city was one of the names of Tigranakert.
Baron HAMLET, we should probably stop to allow time for questions.
Okay, so I hope that we will speak about Khachkar's very interesting culture of Khachkars of Artsakh in another time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Baron Harkeli Hamlet. This is fascinating information. I think you say exactly right. We need to have another event, more events, and I think this is only the beginning. So maybe now, Mark, I'm going to turn things over to you to handle the question and answer. I see they're building up, and hopefully we can answer some questions. So.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful, learned presentations, which we know only begin to scratch the surface of what you have to offer on all of these subjects. So thank you for your forbearance. And thank you to the audience for the many questions that are coming in. And before we go to them, I should mention, because several people have asked about this, the program will indeed be available on NAASR's YouTube channel, where it's live streaming right now, and it will continue to be available on that as soon as the event is completed. So for people who had to leave early or weren't able to attend or want to listen again and try to process all of this information, it will be accessible there. So let me go to this. Well, this is, I think, perhaps the inevitable first question. Can any of you touch upon what is actively being done to preserve this valuable architectural and cultural heritage, particularly in the areas occupied or ceded to Azerbaijan, and what can people do to help contribute to this enormous task? And of course, we would welcome input from any of you on this.
I'll jump in, but I absolutely defer to my colleagues here. But I'll say that within the past few days, that is within less than a week, that is since November 9th, many projects are on the ground working right now in Artsakh to document the monuments, some using laser scanning devices in order to record as much information as possible. There is database creation rather, there's PR work being done, there's media outreach being done. There are international organizations that are involved and coordinating. The church is involved, the governments are involved, so there is a lot of projects in place right now that are working, and this is all just being started, and there's a tremendous amount of activity and coordination. It's impressive to have witnessed this machine getting going, and it is happening. And then the other thing I'll say is that if you wish to help, one of the things that you can do right now is sign the petitions that are circulating online, read the open letters and forward them to everyone you know, get on social media and talk about what's happening. Social media is crucial here because there's a lot also of misinformation that's out there. So be as active as you can to raise awareness about what is going on. And that's about all I can say at the moment, but maybe some of my colleagues have more to add.
I want to just add that we have a very rich archaeological collections in the museums of Artsakh. So we have done something to protect all these collections. And the second, we are now in a monitoring of the processes in the region. And the third, we at the Institute of Archaeology, we organize a group, and soon we will have the one real list of losing monuments, and for using the all petitions, the all letters, when we strongly know we have at these territories this important monument. Not each one will create his own list with many mistakes and so on. So we are doing this all at now. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question here, and while we generally aren't identifying the questioners, this person had to leave and asked that this question be asked and that he be identified, from Stephen Sim, suggesting that to prevent future cultural genocides by Azerbaijan, it would be good to not get away from the earlier one. That is to say, the stalled UNESCO investigation into the old Julfa destruction should be restarted. Can anyone comment on the status of that and UNESCO's position on either that investigation or on any current situations, please?
If Simon Magakian is here, the coordinator of Julfacom, maybe he will answer more correctly. But if he is not here, I can add some information.
He may be in attendance, but since he cannot be heard from, we would defer to you, Hamlet.
Is a photographer who have taken many pictures of Nakhichevan destructive monument, Julfa monument, maybe. But I want to say that all letters that all letters to international organizations never have been successfully. About the Julfa Khachkars, about the European commissions who visit this area. I twice applied to ICOMOS, to UNESCO, say, let us have a monitoring on monuments in conflict zone. They said we couldn't take your applying because it's a territory of Azerbaijan. I help many organizations with data, but I don't think that we didn't do anything before, and I am not aware that if we will send letters to international organizations, it will helpful. It's my personal thought about this. Thank you.
Bit of a more specific question, and for anyone who would care to, please provide a little bit more background information about Hassan Jalal or the Hassan Jalalians, their historical role and origins.
You know that the Arabian joke over 250 years, and then some Seljukian influence. To understand these names, we must have an opinion that Eastern Armenia, and especially Artsakh, until the 19th century, be freedoms, feudal systems, meliks, they have a huge political and administrative rule. To have an administrative rule in such environment where the Arabs, Muslims, some another tribes are, you have a more not ecclesiastical, but the war way. For example, or many Khachkars, we see that on Khachkars we have only warriors. So I think that it was in political conjuncture, the whole region, not only Armenians called Hassan, but Kurds called Hassan, Georgians called Hassan. For example, you can compare with Soviet era when many Armenians had Russian names. It's another political situation, and in any case, the names of Armenian nobles are not any connection with other ethnic or other religious circumstances.
Patrick, were you about to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say approximately the same thing. It was a kind of attitude from the nobility of Armenia since the caliphate to use Muslim names. And we have many kings who were Arabic and then Turkish names. It is a kind of mode and tradition. It is very common. According as far as this dynasty is concerned, if our listener is interested in studying the history of this dynasty and other dynasties, he or she should look at the very well-known studies published, for example, by Claude Moutafian. For example, in one of his last books, he brings very clear and detailed tables presenting the history of the different families and the dynasties concerning the whole history of Armenia. It is very useful, and it is one of the newest state of the research on this question. But it is not the only one, of course. It's a good basis to start such a work, because it is up to date. It was up to date when the book was published some years ago. The book is called L'Arménie du Levant. L'Arménie du Levant. Armenia of the Levant, l'Arménie du Levant, and it was published in Paris, 2012.
Thank you, because one of the other questions actually was, or that I'm essentially reframing in this form, for recommendations for readings in Western languages, in particular, on the history, art, culture of Artsakh.
A certain number of books have been published on the history of Artsakh. As far as I know, is in French and in English. Among them, I would like to underline one book which is nicely illustrated, and it is called Artsakh, Jardin des Arts et des Traditions in French, and the same in English, Garden of Armenian Arts and Traditions. It was published in Paris in 2011 by the representation in France of the Artsakh Republic, the Republic of Artsakh. And it is abundantly illustrated. It's a very good introduction to the history and the culture of Artsakh. And there are many others, not so many, but there are some others in French and in English. I could give a bibliography if it is necessary. So you could perhaps convey to the person in question my email, and he or she could write to me. I would send a small bibliography.
Wonderful, wonderful. Christina, you were going to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say Patrick is too modest to say it, but there's a wonderful book called The Caucasian Knot in the English version, and it is
right.
History, art history of the region, and still very pertinent. So.
And I would add some of the English language translations by George Bernoutian of primary historical sources are extremely valuable as well, and he provides a lot of annotation and context for them in his introductions. So let me go to another question here. And this is regarding combining two questions. the concern being expressed over the safety of materials, items excavated at Tigranakert, as well as some of the manuscript works that were discussed by Tamara. Can you address where these are currently and whether they are in Artsakh, outside, if they are safe, and likewise for HAMLET regarding objects excavated at Tigranakert?
Objects excavated in Tigranakert, in Amaras, in many sites of Artsakh in last years are in safety.
Թամարա նաև հարցնում են ձեռագրերի մասին, որտեղ են հիմա գտնվում ձեռագրերը, որ այն տարածքներից, որոնք հանձնվում են հիմա Ադրբեջանին։ Ձայնը չեք միացրել, Թամարա ջան։
Այսինքն նկատի ունենք Մատենադարան Գանձասարում պահվող ձեռագրերի մասին է հարցը, այո։ Պատերազմական իրավիճակների հետ կապված այդ ձեռագրերը մի քանի շաբաթ առաջ բերվեցին Երևան, ժամանակավոր հուսանք, որ բերվեցին Երևան եւ պահվում են առայժմ մեր Մատենադարանում։ Հետագա ընթացքը իհարկե ցույց կտա, թե ինչպես կլինի։
So, because of
Այո,
the war,
եւ ձեռագրերը եւ հնատիպ գրքերը եւ արխիվային փաստաթղթերը բոլորն այժմ գտնվում են Մաշտոցի անվան Մատենադարանում։
So if we speak about the manuscripts kept at the Gandzasar Scientific and Cultural Center that we have next to the Gandzasar Monastery, due to the war, we transferred them to Yerevan, to the Mesrop, Mashtots, Matenadaran, and they are safe now. Of course, it's temporary because, as we know, Gandzasar will not pass to Azerbaijan, so we hope that we will take them back to Gandzasar and the center will function as it used to.
Thank you. Another question asks if any Armenians will be allowed to remain at monuments in the regions that are being relinquished, control is being relinquished, to care for them, or whether all Armenians will have to leave. For example, well, I don't want to get into examples. What is the situation in that respect? Anyone? You understand the question, though, right? That, for example, at Dadian-Oztemel, I think, which is one such monument, will anyone be allowed to remain on site?
We learned from information from that the priest in charge of Dadian-Oztemel first, some days ago, was preparing his departure to Armenia, and then, unless I'm mistaken, he received a call, or he talked with the president of Karabakh, Archaeological, who told him to stay in Dadian-Oztemel. And recently, yesterday or today, I read that he, the same priest, declared that he will not abandon his monastery.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't have, and we don't have more detailed information on the precise, the real situation in Dadian-Oztemel. We must underline that Dadian-Oztemel is very close to the boundary of the previous republic, the previous region or republic of Artsakh. It is very close to it could be perhaps the object of of a negotiation, very local, on precisely on this question, in order to add it to the territory of this of the Armenian region, because it is almost joined to it.
Question: does anyone know if the Catholicos has contacted Patriarch Kirill of Moscow for support and assistance in protecting the monasteries and churches? Not that we're aware of. Question about Tigranakert as again. Geographically, where does Tigranakert fall within the current situation of lands remaining under Armenian control versus not? Is Tigranakert in the area under Armenian control or the area under Azerbaijani control? Hamlet.
But now Tigranakert is under Armenian control.
Okay.
But according to that paper, if they will return all Agdam region, and if Agdam region has his boundaries in 17th and 18th, this part of land is inside of the Agdam region boundaries. So I can't say that will return or no, but according Azerbaijani administrative definition of 18th, yes.
Well, there are, of course, innumerable questions, perhaps too many, too much to get to. So I would like to ask each of the speakers if they have anything they would like to say by way of conclusion before we wrap this up, since especially for our friends in Armenia, it's rather late. So if anyone would like to say anything, Patrick, yes.
In addition to what CHRISTINA said before concerning the measures taken, so the several projects, I would like to continue a theme that we touched during our discussions before this encounter, concerning the necessity to try to contact, to create a contact with researchers and perhaps centers, scientific or academic centers in Azerbaijan, Azerbaijanese scholars, to try to establish a contact with those who would like to discuss with us, to share our concern concerning the monuments, at least to try to establish a contact, to propose to enter in a dialogue with us in order to discuss the fate of the monuments. I suppose that there should be people sincerely worried, or as we are worried by the state, the situation of the heritage, and it would be correct and useful and even, I think, necessary to create such a possibility of exchanges on these questions with those who would like. That's my proposal. I don't know how to do it.
It's a hopeful thought. I guess we will see. Then I will, if no one else would like to add anything, I will ask CHRISTINA to bring this important program to a conclusion, and I will only once again say thank you so much to the participants for your outstanding work and doing this under very difficult circumstances, and to the audience for joining us today. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And yes, thank you all so much. Those of you who've presented, this is a painful time, and I'm so really impressed by your erudition and all your work and your devotion to your subjects. And I thank everyone for listening in. I hope that we will have more events like this. It's awfully important to explore the deep and detailed history of Armenian Artsakh, as well as the obviously ever-changing current politics, because those two things are connected. So yes, I think that's it for all of us over here. And thank you to all of the presenters, Mark, to everybody out there, to the students. And that's all.
Thank you.